Welcome to my next video build. It is Tamiya's 1/48 scale P-51B Mustang. In this video I show you a full build of the model. I will add rivets, improve the cockpit and use a set of Montex Masks for the first time. I do some nice weathering and put it all together into a good looking D-Day Mustang that is shown in flight. Let's get to work. As usual, I separate all parts from the sprue and remove any excess. I don't cut the connection to the parts too close and sand the overhang later. A little tri-fit testing helps to identify possible problems. Although the kit is more than 20 years old, the quality is impressive, as you can see from the fit of the wings and the fuselage parts. A pilot figure is also included, but this can no longer keep up with more modern ones. I use a leftover figure from Tamiya's P-38 kit, which has more details. The cockpit details are also very basic, so I was very happy to have found an Eduard PE set to improve it. Let's improve some details without using expensive resin parts. I removed the ridge from the exhaust pipes and drilled them out with a micro drill. For smoothing I used Tamiya extra thin. The same thing happens with the gun barrels, which are molded into the wings. Some holes need to be drilled and the cockpit is prepared for the photo-etched parts. Not all B Mustangs could retract the rear landing gear, so I decided that this Mustang could do it. The rear landing gear doors had to be closed for the in-flight conversion. To do this, I cut off the fixed doors, re-glued them and sanded them to size. More parts are being put together and things are progressing well. A big advantage of the Tamiya Mustang is that an in-flight conversion can be carried out very easily. 2 cuts on the landing flaps are enough and they can be shown retracted. With my Eduard D Mustang, I had a lot more work and adjustment to implement an in-flight conversion. The front landing gear doors can also be closed without further adjustment. The fit is just great. Then as now, Tamiya refrained from showing the complete rivet structure. I'm sure they could do it very well. There are many plans online showing the rivets of the Mustang. I pre-draw the lines on the respective parts with a pencil and then run along the lines with Rosie the riveter. You can leave out the wings because the rivets weren't visible here. They have been sanded, primed and painted to improve the airflow. I start painting the cockpit with a coat of US Interior yellow-green. I don't use primer here because the paint works well without it, as long as the surface is clean. Flat white is used as a primer for the upcoming yellow. I use black for the devices behind the pilot seat and as a primer for the metal colors. Now the photo-etched parts are attached. I use AMO Ultra glue to secure it. The instrument panel and the sidewalls can be clearly seen, even when the canopy is closed, so the effort is worth it. The next step is painting the details in the cockpit. For this I use different acrylic paints. I'm already trying to achieve some color modulation and simulate scratches and color chipping, but the cockpit still looks very clean. I only know the floors of Mustang cockpits to be covered with black wood. In this case I followed the Tamiya instruction and tried to work out the details. In the end you won't be able to see the floor. Before weathering begins, some parts are assembled. The pilot figure was painted off camera with acrylic paints. I use different filters for the weathering of the cockpit and the pilot figure. For me, filters have the right dilution, especially for small parts, and can be used quickly. I like dry brushing with metal oil colors. Details can be highlighted again nicely. This is also the last step of my interior weathering. The previous work is now sealed with a matte clear varnish. After drying, the cockpit can finally be assembled. Even though not every detail will be visible in the end, working on the interior is always a highlight of the project that I really enjoy. What do you think about working on parts that you don't see in the end? Let me know in the comments. Now enjoy the finished cockpit. The cockpit was installed without any problems. Now the fuselage halves can be brought together. I go section by section and take my time. I temporarily fix the model with masking tape and carefully glue each section with Tamiya extra thin. The goal is to have as little rework as possible later. I use the drying time of the glue to mask the propeller tips and exhaust. Burnt metal brings a second shade to the exhaust pipes. Construction is now making good progress. The accuracy of fit remains very good. The wings and fuselage also fit together well. Overall, the Mustang is easy to build. I can recommend it to beginners or if you are looking for a quick to build model for in between. Some parts need to be painted black before we can close the canopy and wings. Now it's time to clean and sand the glued areas and connections. I drilled a hole for an 8mm acrylic rod. This will later be put into a 3D printed stand. Another hole was drilled at the top, which holds a wooden stick. The stick helps to handle the model better when painting and to set it aside to dry. After sanding, some panel lines need to be rescribed. For this I use a razor saw and a scribing tool from Trumpeter. Lost rivets are also replaced. Now it is time to mask the clear parts. The Montex masks are a little stiffer than Eduard masks and lift slightly on curved surfaces. It is best to press them down again shortly before painting. Final parts, such as the perfectly fitting flaps, are attached. The model is now ready to be painted. Before painting, the model is cleaned with isopropanol to remove grease and dust. As a first layer, I apply the cockpit interior paint to the clear parts. I then prime the additional tanks with black and paint the propeller plates. The aircraft itself is sprayed with spray primer from AK, which is allowed to dry for 24 hours before further paint is applied. The USAAF color scheme consists of two colors, neutral grey 43 for the underside and dark olive drab 41 for the top of the aircraft. I start with the underside and apply the paint evenly without shading or any effects. While the grey dries, I spray the fuel tanks with Mr. Hobby Silver. I use a mix of neutral grey and insignia white to fade some of the panels on the underside and create the effect of depth. Using the remaining paint in the airbrush, I pre-shade some panels on the top of the aircraft. After the grey is dry and taped off, I move on to olive drab. I spray the main color evenly again and fade the inside of the panels with faded olive drab. You could also add some yellow to the dark olive drab to lighten the color. Much of this work will be covered by the invasion stripes later, but I'm taking it as an exercise to improve my airbrush skills. After the main colors have dried, we will now create a custom D-Day Mustang. For this I'm using a set of Montex masks for the first time. The set contains masks for the clear parts, national insignia and markings for two different aircraft. In combination with the invasion stripes, you have to think a little about the order in which you mask things off. Overall, I needed a little more time here than I thought, but the masks are very easy to use and fit perfectly. Spraying the colors went without any major problems. I tried to apply the layers very thinly and used a pressure of 15 psi. Now it was a constant change between spraying, drying, remasking, spraying. The white base layer for the national insignia on the wings caused me a few problems. There was probably a small contamination. Sanding and a coat of Tamiya flat white then brought the solution. There were no problems on the fuselage and everything worked well. I have to say, I was very impressed with the result. Painted markings are not the quickest solution, but they look so much better than the thick Tamiya decals. Just give it a try. Some decals still had to be applied before we could continue with the weathering. But that was very quick, because Tamiya only supplies the most necessary stencil data, which is fine. I usually do the weathering in several layers. I start with a gray filter on the bottom for all white areas in individual panels. Later I use gray and green tones for the top. The goal is to increase the color modulation and break up monotonous areas. In preparation for the next weathering layer, all metal parts are sealed with semi-gloss clear varnish. All other parts receive a layer of matte clear varnish to achieve better pigment adhesion. If you don't like weathering, you could stop now and the model would be ready for final assembly. But that's not my approach. All parts get now a complete oil wash. I let everything dry for 30 minutes and then start cleaning the model. For the next layer, I apply the oil paint directly without diluting it. I want to use it to simulate dirt accumulation and increase the color variation. The paint is very economical and you should only apply a small amount, otherwise you will spend a long time blending it. For blending, I use a dry, flat brush and cotton swabs. If you are not satisfied with the result, everything can be easily removed and you can start again. As already shown in the cockpit, I'm using metal oil paint and the dry brush technique here again. For stronger effects I use ready-made enamel products, like here for example to show leaked fuel. At the end of the weathering, filters are used again to create smaller effects and highlights. Now it's time for chipping. For me, Vallejo metal colors works best. With a fine brush and a steady hand you have good control. The paint dries very thin, which creates the effect of chipped paint. The final details are now painted with the brush and acrylic paint. Dirt from the exhaust and the guns is sprayed with the airbrush. The previous work of weathering and chipping is now sealed with clear varnish. I use different clear varnishes again to keep the shine of the metal parts. By adjusting the thinner you can influence the desired finish. For the in-flight display of the Mustang I designed a stand and printed it with a 3D printer. I had already adapted the acrylic rod so that the stand only needed to be painted. The print had to be lightly sanded and primed. I also took the opportunity to build a new stand for my Eduard D Mustang. Both aircraft will soon be standing side by side. A little more clear varnish and the stand was ready. There are still a few final steps to be done. First I opened the cockpit and cleaned the paint off the clear parts and polished them. Unfortunately, I still had to adjust the pilot because he didn't want to fit in his seat. I should have installed him with the cockpit. After that was done, I added the missing parts like exhausts and fuel tanks. For the antenna wires I used yarn and sealed it with a mix of white glue and water. Now the build is coming to an end. I had a lot of fun with the project and I'm very happy with the result. I can still recommend the kit without reservation, and the masks from Montex are a useful addition. If you like my D-Day Mustang, leave me a comment, and the thumbs up helps every small channel a lot. Thank you for watching, and now enjoy the final reveal.